You didn't find this by accident. Maybe this is where the faith you've been seeking finally meets you. The kind that doesn't shout from a stage or demand your performance. The kind that sits quietly beside you in the dark, asking nothing but your presence. Right now, your room is settling into its own silence. The light softens. Your breath slows without you forcing it. You hear the hum of something. Maybe your fan, maybe distant traffic, and somehow it becomes a rhythm your heart leans into. Your hands stop fidgeting. The screen glow dims. There's nothing urgent right now, just this, just you. You probably won't survive this world on noise and hurry alone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment with your city and what time you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin to notice the stillness, not just around you, but inside you. It's unfamiliar, like walking into a room you forgot existed. All day, your mind has been wired to respond to messages, to alerts, to demands that come disguised as urgency. But none of that followed you into this quiet. There's no pressure here to be impressive. No one's watching. And strangely, that's where God often begins. He doesn't crash through the noise. He waits in the silence. Like water, collecting in the low places, like dawn that doesn't ask permission. He arrives gently, without drama. You don't even realize he's been here until something in you softens. There's a story that's been passed around for centuries of a traveler who asks a monk what it takes to hear God. The monk answers simply, when the wind no longer shakes your branches and your roots no longer crave the sunlight others have, you will know. That kind of quiet doesn't come easy in the modern world. You're taught to fill every gap answer, every question, and chase every form of relevance. You scroll, not because you're curious, but because being alone with your thoughts feels risky. Like maybe if you stop, you'll be behind. But behind what? Who told you that constant stimulation was the only way to stay alive? There's a kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that seeps into your soul. It's what shows up when you've been productive all day, but not present. When your phone says screen time 7 hours and your heart says connection 0. You go through the motions, but there's a quiet ache behind your ribs that whispers, there's got to be more than this. And there is. But it doesn't shout. It doesn't perform. It waits like the way leaves settle once the wind stops. Like breath after a long sigh. That's where God starts speaking, not in language you can hear with your ears, but in the calm that fills the space once the distractions fall away. Maybe this is why silence unnerves you at first. Because when everything else gets quiet, what's left is you. And sometimes, that's the part you're running from. The regrets, the doubts, the ways you compare yourself to curated versions of people you barely know. The things you wish you'd said, the things you wish you hadn't. In the silence, you remember. But here's the hidden gift God remembers too. But He doesn't remember you the way you do. He sees beyond the highlight reel and the failure loop. He sees the trying, the surviving, the showing up, even when you feel like disappearing. He sees the tiny ways you still care, even when your faith feels faint. Tonight isn't about fixing anything. It's not about doing more. It's about stopping long enough to feel what's been asking for your attention, not from a screen, but from your spirit. Maybe you've forgotten how to listen, not because you don't care, but because the noise never stops long enough for you to recognize the sound of stillness. And here's a strange truth. The more you listen, the less you feel the need to talk. You start to realize that you're not missing out by being quiet. You're actually finding your way back to peace, to simplicity, to God who doesn't need to go viral to be real. You can almost hear it now, can't you? The hush between your thoughts, the space where something sacred lives. Not productivity, not performance, just presence. You and God in a world that finally stops spinning for a moment. You're not here to impress Him. You're here to remember Him. And maybe in doing that, you start remembering yourself too, the you that doesn't need filters, achievements, or applause. The you that's already enough, already held, already seen. There will be other nights, other noise, other demands. But for now, just breathe. Let the silence do its work. Let it peel away the layers that the day stacked on your soul. Let it teach you what volume could never reveal. You're not lost. You're not behind. You're just quiet enough now to realize you've been held the whole time. It doesn't hit all at once. The realization creeps in like light edging across your floor just before sunrise. You think you've been fine, getting through handling things, answering messages, staying productive. But now that everything's quiet, there's a strange tightness behind your eyes, a low hum inside your chest. You've been carrying more than you knew. The noise didn't seem like noise when it came dressed as routine. Background music while you worked. A podcast to fill the morning silence. A dozen short videos between tasks. You weren't trying to avoid God, you were just trying to stay afloat. But sometimes the most dangerous noise is the one you've gotten used to. It starts to feel normal, to never finish a thought, to switch from one thing to the next before the last has even settled. You scroll past 100 smiling faces and wonder why yours still feels blank. Your mind skips like a pebble across the surface of your life, but never sinks, never rests. And when the noise finally pauses, like it is now, you feel it. The echo of everything unresolved. The griefs you never named. The dreams you pushed aside. The questions about your purpose that you keep postponing. The people you miss but don't reach out to. They rise up not to haunt you, but to be seen. That's the thing about silence. It doesn't just empty you, it reveals you. And God, He's not afraid of what comes out when the noise fades. He's already been holding it, holding you. The silence just gives you a chance to see it too. It's tempting to fill this moment, isn't it? To open another app, reach for one more distraction. But what if you stayed here? What if the discomfort is sacred? What if this is the beginning of healing, not the end of safety? Maybe this is why Jesus often slipped away. Not because He needed distance from people, but because He needed space for clarity, for alignment, for rest. He wasn't addicted to applause. He didn't run on adrenaline. He knew that in a world filled with voices, silence was where truth settled. There's something profoundly countercultural about being still, about not reacting immediately, about letting your soul catch up to your body. The world prizes speed, but faith requires slowness, depth, presence. And presence begins with noticing. So notice this: your shoulders are relaxing. Your breath is longer than before. You're not in a rush. Nothing urgent is pulling at you. You've stepped outside the stream of urgency, and you're still alive, still loved. You don't need to prove your worth by being constantly available. You don't need to measure your value by the number of replies you've sent or boxes you've checked. Your spirit was not designed to sprint from sunrise to midnight. There is a reason you crave quiet, even if you fear it too. And here's the deeper truth: God often uses discomfort to draw you closer. Not to punish you, but to awaken you. He lets the silence speak so that you can hear beyond the noise of performance and perfection. Because sometimes, before God gives you an answer, He gives you space. Space to let the layers peel back. Space to finally hear your own heart. You may not realize it, but you're already beginning to hear differently. You're starting to recognize that not all silence is empty. Some of it is full of grace, of memory, of invitations you never noticed in the rush. And in that fullness, God whispers, not all at once, not like lightning, more like dew. Like the slow fade-away fog lifts from the field and reveals the ground beneath. There's no pressure in it, just presence. You don't have to be anyone else right now. Not the high achiever, not the helper, not the strong one. Just you, sitting in the quiet, letting the stillness settle in. It's not a waste. It's the way back. The noise isn't evil, but it can numb you. And when you're numb, you forget who you are. You forget who you belong to. So tonight, this silence, it's not absence, it's remembrance. It's God reminding you, I'm still here. You're still mine. Maybe the noise you didn't notice is the very thing He's peeling away, not to leave you empty, but to leave you open. You've probably noticed by now, silence has a way of making you question your pace. Not just how fast you're moving, but why. There's a strange ache that comes when you realize you've been sprinting without ever asking where the finish line is. You've mastered the art of doing, but being, that feels foreign, maybe even rebellious. You weren't taught to rest. You were taught to hustle, to keep up, to optimize every hour like it's a product. You learn to apologize for stillness, to equate rest with laziness, and to believe that exhaustion is just the price of success. But what if that's the lie that's keeping you spiritually starved? There's a different kind of wisdom that whispers, stop. Not because you're failing, but because you're full. Because your soul is saturated with noise and is begging for lightness. It's not that you can't carry it all. It's that you were never meant to. When you rest, the world doesn't fall apart. But something else happens. Your illusions start to crumble. You start to see that much of what you chased wasn't rooted in peace, but in pressure. That your schedule isn't always sacred, and your productivity doesn't always equal purpose. You begin to sense that your worth was never meant to be measured by metrics. This is where God teaches gently, not with lectures, but with letting you breathe again. When Jesus withdrew to quiet places, it wasn't just to escape, it was to realign. He didn't need to do everything. He just needed to do the right things. And that's the kind of discernment silence offers you. It's here in the stillness that you remember something the world never rewards. Slowness can be sacred. Taking your time isn't a flaw. It's a form of faith. Faith that not everything urgent is important. Faith that your life isn't an emergency. Faith that God isn't in a rush with you. So why are you rushing yourself? There's an old tree in your memory. Maybe you've seen one like it before. Its branches wide, its roots deeper than you can imagine. That tree isn't in a hurry, and yet it grows. Slowly, faithfully, through seasons of wind and stillness. It doesn't need to perform to be strong. Its strength is hidden, quiet, steady. Just like the kind you're cultivating now. The world might not notice your quiet. It might not applaud your rest. But heaven isn't measuring your pace, it's measuring your presence. And right now, you're here. You're listening. You're resisting the urge to fill every second. That's more than enough. It's okay if your rest feels unnatural at first. That's just the residue of a culture that taught you noise equals value. But deep down, something truer is waking up. A part of you that remembers being a child, not worrying about schedules or followers or being impressive. Just being. Breathing. Beloved, maybe tonight you don't need to make a plan. Maybe you don't need to figure anything out. Maybe your only task is to trust that being still is a way of being found. Because when you resist rest, you resist repair. But when you rest, you begin to recover parts of yourself that got buried beneath the busyness. Joy that isn't tied to achievement. Curiosity without comparison. Silence that isn't awkward but alive. So let yourself be. Let the quiet hold you. Let the worry soften. You don't need to do more tonight. You've already done something sacred by choosing stillness in a world that worships speed. You are not a machine. You are not a brand. You are a soul, and your soul needs room to breathe. Remember the candle you lit, or maybe just imagined lighting the one flickering softly, not competing with the darkness, but simply refusing to go out. That's you tonight. You don't need to burn brighter. You just need to stay steady, present. God isn't waiting for your next achievement. He's waiting for your attention. And now that the world has finally quieted, maybe you can feel it. The invitation to be. Just be. It's subtle, the way God teaches you to hear again. Not through louder words, but through gentler ones. The world trains your ears to crave volume, breaking news, buzzing phones, voices layered over voices. But in the stillness, something shifts. You start to notice the quieter layers of life, the soft click of a settling house, the sigh you didn't know you released, the way your own breath sounds when there's no background track competing for space. And slowly, you begin to tune your inner frequency. You've been living on static for so long that clarity feels unfamiliar at first. But it's not that God wasn't speaking. It's that you were tuned to another station, one that broadcasted fear, performance, comparison, urgency. Now, you're learning how to dial into something different, something holy. There's a rhythm beneath the rush, and you're starting to feel it, like walking beside a river that's always flowed, but you only just paused long enough to hear it. You've been trained to respond instantly, to comment, to reply, to have a take. But wisdom grows in the gap between stimulus and response. That space is where God often moves. The frequency of heaven isn't flashy. It's not addictive like your feed. It's not programmed to trigger dopamine. It's slow, tender, like how light moves across a room as the sun sets, like how roots stretch quietly underground, unseen but alive. You won't find it by accident. You have to listen differently. You used to think silence meant nothing was happening. But now, you're starting to suspect it's the opposite, that silence is when the real work begins. Because it's here that things are revealed. Motives surface. Assumptions loosen. You stop reacting and start reflecting. You start asking questions that don't demand answers, just honesty. Questions like, why am I really doing this? Who am I when no one is watching? What parts of me have I silenced out of fear of not being enough? And maybe the most powerful one, what if I already am? Jesus often told stories and parables, simple, slow tales that didn't rush to a point. Not because he lacked clarity, but because he knew the soul understands best when it has room to listen. That same invitation is in front of you now, to let the truth come in like rain, not like lightning. Slowly, gently, deeply. It might be uncomfortable at first, this tuning in. You'll hear echoes you'd forgotten, like the inner critic who disguises himself as discipline, or the voice that tells you rest is for the weak. But if you listen longer, those voices lose their grip, and underneath them, a better voice rises. One that doesn't scold, one that sounds like home. God's voice rarely argues. It doesn't rush to justify itself. It doesn't plead for attention. It simply waits until you're quiet enough to receive it. That kind of gentleness is disarming. It doesn't control, it frees. And in that freedom, you start to make different choices. You turn off your notifications, not as a protest, but as a prayer. You step outside without your phone, not to post, but to notice. You begin to make space for silence, not because it's easy, but because it's sacred. And slowly, your life starts to sound different. You're not missing anything by unplugging. You're rediscovering everything. You're tuning your soul to something deeper than trends or likes. You're learning to hear again, not just what the world says, but what your spirit knows. Do you remember the last time you walked in nature without rushing? When you noticed the patterns in a leaf, or the way the light danced through branches? That was God speaking too. Creation doesn't speak in hashtags. It speaks in presence, in beauty that doesn't need to sell itself. And when you slow down enough, you start to speak that language again. The language of peace, of trust, of enoughness. Not everyone will understand. Some will call your slowness falling behind. But behind what? The noise, the pressure, the illusion of always being on. Let them run ahead. You are choosing something better: clarity, depth, God. Tonight, your heart is recalibrating. It's learning a new rhythm, not one of endless urgency, but of eternal presence. You are tuning into the frequency where grace lives, and it sounds like stillness. You've heard it before, but tonight it settles differently. Jesus walked away often, not from love, not from purpose, but from noise, from crowds that praised him, from pressure that demanded more, from expectations that wanted to shape him into something he never came to be. He withdrew again and again into the quiet, into the mountains, into the dark hours before dawn, not to escape but to remain aligned. You've likely felt it too, the magnetic pull of distraction, the obligation to stay visible, stay engaged, stay relevant. The moment you unplug something inside whispers, you should be doing more. But Jesus never rushed to meet every request. He never burned out trying to meet everyone's needs. He knew that withdrawal wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. There's a sacred rhythm hidden in that kind of stepping away. One you're being invited to learn now. You don't need to delete your whole life to find peace, but you might need to walk away sometimes. Not dramatically, quietly, like slipping into a garden at dusk, like pausing before responding, like saying no to one more thing, not out of apathy, but because your soul is not infinite. And here's the quiet truth: no one tells you boundaries are holy. They're not just about protecting your energy. They're about preserving your intimacy with God. When you fill every corner of your time with obligations, you leave no room for wonder, for reflection, for real connection that doesn't come through a screen. Sometimes faith looks like staying. Sometimes it looks like leaving for a little while. Not leaving people, but leaving pressure. Not abandoning responsibility, but abandoning the lie that you're only as worthy as your output. You need sacred pauses. You need the quiet where your name is not being tagged, where your value isn't being rated, where your heart isn't on display. Even now, something in you exhales. The pressure lifts just a bit. The world hasn't ended because you slowed down. You didn't miss your shot. You didn't fall behind. You just walked away like he did. You followed the wisdom of one who didn't need the crowd to know he was beloved. And what did Jesus do in the silence? He didn't strategize or brand himself. He prayed. He listened. He let the noise fall away so that only truth remained. That's what silence does. It distills. It reminds you of what's essential. It scrubs away the ego and leaves behind the essence. You don't need a mountain to practice this. Maybe your retreat is the 2 minutes before your day begins. The moment in the car before you walk into a meeting. That small space before you post. The quiet breath before the call. Those pauses are not empty, they are altars. They are where your hurried self bows to something slower, deeper, eternal. There's a kind of strength that grows in solitude. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to discern. You start to sense what is yours to carry and what isn't. You begin to hear which voices matter and which ones only echo your fears. You learn to wait, to listen longer, to respond slower. And in that space, you remember even Jesus, who carried the weight of the world, took time to walk away, you too are allowed to rest, to disappear for a moment, not to prove anything, but to become grounded again in who you truly are. There's a strange beauty in no longer needing to be everywhere. You start to show up differently, more fully, more present, less fractured. Your words gain weight because they're not scattered. Your presence deepens because it comes from wholeness, not hustle. Maybe you've spent too long running from the quiet, thinking it would expose your weakness. But what if it reveals your rootedness instead? What if the real you, God's you, isn't found in the spotlight, but in the shadows, where faith grows like moss, quiet, consistent, resilient? So tonight, let that truth settle into your bones. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be hidden for a time, because hiddenness is where God does some of his most transformative work. You're not being lazy. You're being led. You don't always know why you reach for your phone. Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's habit. But if you trace it far enough back, it's often hunger. Not for information or entertainment, but for something deeper, for connection, for meaning, for a moment of relief from the dull ache that shadows your busyness. You tap, you scroll, you swipe, you laugh, you sigh. And yet, after an hour passes, the ache is still there, maybe even louder. Because what you're really searching for can't be downloaded, can't be streamed, can't be liked or shared. What you're craving is presence. Not lowercase presence, the kind you show to others, but capital P presence. The kind that fills a room without words. The kind that steadies your pulse without answers. It's startling, isn't it, to realize how much of your day is shaped by reach. You reach for the remote, the inbox, the feed, but rarely do you pause to ask, why am I reaching? What am I really hoping to touch? Maybe tonight is the first time you let yourself wonder. There's a reason the ache comes at night. When the world gets quiet and the screens lose their glow, your soul stirs. It doesn't want more content. It wants contact. It wants the gentle reassurance that you are not alone, that you are known, and that you don't have to earn that knowing. Jesus met people in their hunger, but not always with food. Sometimes with a question. Sometimes with silence. Sometimes with his presence alone. He knew that beneath every craving was a deeper thirst. And he never rushed to satisfy the surface when the soul was starving. You're not weak because you reach. You're human. But maybe tonight you can reach differently. Not outward, but inward. Not to distract, but to discern. Not for validation, but for stillness. That's where healing begins. It won't feel natural at first. The silence might feel sharp, like you're missing out, like everyone else is connecting while you're sitting in the dark. But the truth is, most people are just as lonely inside their noise. The difference is, you're beginning to face yours, and that is sacred work. You don't have to renounce your phone or unplug forever. This isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. About remembering that technology is a tool, not a tether. That silence is not punishment, it's a return, a recalibration. a space where you can finally breathe without performing. Try this next time the ache arises before you reach for a screen. Place your hand over your chest. Feel your own heartbeat. Let it remind you you're alive. You're held. You're not just reacting to the world. You are here witnessing it, participating in it, loved through it. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you journal one line, God, I'm here. Maybe you do nothing except breathe and feel the weight of your own existence for a moment. That's not wasted time. That's the kind of prayer that has no words and yet says everything. There's a rhythm you're learning now. One that doesn't fight the ache, but listens to it. One that doesn't shame the reaching, but redirects it. You're not wrong for wanting connection, but not every kind of connection heals. Not every scroll leads to peace. So you practice. Gently. You notice when the craving rises. You name it. You sit with it. You invite God into it. Not with perfect words, but with your presence. That's what He's always wanted anyway. Even now, as you lie here, the urge to check one more thing may linger. That's okay. You're unlearning something, and unlearning takes time. Be kind to yourself in the process, because beneath the noise, the ache behind the scroll is not your enemy, it's your compass. It points you toward the deeper longing, toward the God who doesn't demand your attention, but quietly waits for it. Always there. Always close. Closer than the screen in your hand. Closer than your own breath. You don't need to run from the ache anymore. You just need to listen to what it's telling you. There's something more, and it's already within reach. There's a moment maybe you felt it when something stings. A comment, a message, a tone, and immediately the words rise in your chest like heat. The urge to correct, to defend, to prove. You hover over the keyboard, fingers ready, heart pounding, but then something stops you. Not fear, not defeat. Something softer, wiser. A whisper. You don't have to answer this one. You pause. You breathe, and the fire cools. Not every battle needs your voice. That's not weakness. It's discernment. It's the strength of knowing that silence can protect what peace has built. Because sometimes silence isn't backing down. It's rising above. You've been taught that silence means losing. That if you don't reply, don't explain, don't assert your truth, you're being walked over. But Jesus taught something different. He stood silent before accusers, not because he lacked truth, but because he was truth. And truth doesn't panic. There is power in choosing restraint. Not the cold kind that shuts people out, but the holy kind that refuses to be pulled into the chaos. When your identity is rooted in something deeper than opinion, you don't need to win every debate. You start to understand that peace is more valuable than being right. In your modern world, where everyone's expected to have an immediate take, choosing not to speak can feel almost scandalous. But the digital culture of reaction doesn't always leave room for reflection. And reflection is where God speaks loudest. You begin to realize some of your most honest prayers have no words. Some of your most healing moments come when you close your mouth and open your heart. That's where wisdom grows, in the soil of pause, in the gap between trigger and response. There's an old image of a quiet garden, walled, hidden, protected, not because it's weak, but because it's sacred. That's your inner world. And not every voice deserves entry. Not every provocation deserves your energy. Not every conflict is yours to fix. You're not called to be silent because you have nothing to say. You're called to be silent sometimes because what you say is too precious to waste. You start to notice the freedom in that, the way silence unhooks you from needing the last word, the way it allows you to release what isn't yours to carry. You walk lighter when you no longer take every battle personally. There will be people who misunderstand you. That's okay. There will be conversations that don't resolve. That's okay too. Because your peace doesn't depend on others agreeing with you. It depends on you choosing what keeps your spirit aligned. You can feel it now, the wisdom of stillness, how it quiets your reactions, not your values, how it anchors you in clarity instead of chaos. You don't always need to speak to be heard by the one who matters most. And in that space of silence, something beautiful happens. You start to hear again. Not just God, but yourself. The true self beneath the layers of defense and performance. The self that's not afraid of being misunderstood because it's already understood by grace. You are not abandoning your voice. You're honoring it. You're choosing when it's best used. You're choosing not to speak from impulse, but from intention. And that choice, that pause, is a form of worship, is a form. So next time the fire rises and you feel the pull to reply, to react, to prove, remember this: silence is not silence when it's rooted in love. It's strength, it's shelter, it's sacred, and sometimes it's the holiest thing you can offer the world. There will come a time when everything feels like it's shaking. Not just the world outside, but the ground beneath your confidence, your rhythm, your sense of control. The plans that made you feel safe begin to shift. The people you counted on grow quiet. Even your prayers feel like they vanish into air. That's when you'll wonder, how do I stay steady when nothing else is? That's when you need the candle. Not a real one, necessarily, but the image of it. One small flame in the middle of a storm, flickering, yes, but still burning. Not because the wind isn't real, but because something stronger is at its core. That candle is your stillness, your choice not to panic, not to rush, not to force your way through what can only be waded through. And that stillness, it's not weakness, it's learned, it's built. It's something you cultivate over time, like a muscle of the spirit. Jesus never promised the storm wouldn't come, but he often pointed to the posture you could carry through it. And his way was rarely dramatic. It was small, unhurried, often unnoticed, yet always grounded. Like the way he knelt to write in the dirt while others demanded judgment. Like the way he walked instead of ran. Like the way he slept on the boat while the waves raged. That kind of peace isn't performative. It doesn't pretend things are fine. It just trusts that even in the chaos, God is still near. And sometimes the only thing you need to do is stay lit, stay grounded, stay here. Your culture doesn't like that answer. It wants strategies, fixes, hacks. But the soul has no shortcuts. The soul doesn't grow through force. It deepens through faithfulness. And that faithfulness often looks like choosing presence in the middle of the unknown. So when the storm picks up, when deadlines loom, when plans unravel, when fear whispers that you're not enough, you return to the candle. You breathe. You pause. You let go of the urge to control. And you trust that staying present is more powerful than sprinting for solutions. You might not see the path yet, but you can see the next step, and that's enough for now. You're not lost just because the map changed. You're not alone just because the world feels loud. The flame inside you, small as it is still light, still here. And that light isn't meant to conquer the storm. It's meant to remind you that storms don't last forever, that not everything has to be solved tonight. That peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the presence of God, even while trouble roars. Maybe tonight, peace doesn't look like everything being okay. Maybe it just looks like not giving up, not numbing out, not shutting down. Maybe it's the simple, holy act of staying with yourself in the discomfort, believing that healing often starts where panic used to live. You've probably noticed something by now. The more you practice stillness, the less the storm defines you. The more you pause, the more space grace has to enter. You don't have to fight everything. You just have to hold the light. Let others run if they must. Let the wind howl. Let the future stay unwritten. You're learning to be the one who stays calm when the room spins. Not because you're stronger, but because you've been held before and you remember what it felt like. There will be days when the flame flickers low. That's okay. Even a flicker is enough to keep hope alive. You don't need to be blazing with clarity or purpose every night. Sometimes simply staying lit is the most powerful thing you can do. Tonight, you're doing just that. You've chosen presence over panic, silence over shouting, steadiness over solving. You're learning the sacred art of not rushing through what God wants to teach you slowly. So let the candle burn. Let it be your reminder that you don't need all the answers to rest. You don't need everything fixed to be faithful. You just need to keep showing up. And you are. There's something strangely familiar about this silence now. It no longer feels empty. It feels like home. Not because everything around you has changed, but because something within you has softened, slowed, returned. Your soul knows the way back. It's not a dramatic journey. No spotlight, no milestones to post. Just quiet steps, one after another, leading you back to the core of who you've always been. Underneath the pressure, beneath the expectations, behind the noise. This is where your real voice lives. The one that isn't shaped by algorithms or applause. And you didn't have to go far. You just had to stop running. In this stillness, old memories surface. Some gentle, some painful. But even the heavy ones arrive more like visitors than threats. You let them pass through. You no longer push them down or perform over them. You hold space. You breathe. And in doing that, you begin to heal in places you didn't even realize were wounded. The world taught you to keep moving. That to stop was to be left behind. But Jesus often paused. At wells, on roadsides, in gardens. He didn't rush people into healing. He walked with them, sat with them, gave them room to become whole. You're learning to give yourself that same grace now. There's a tree you remember from childhood, maybe in real life, maybe just in your imagination. Tall, still, the kind you leaned against without knowing why. That tree wasn't going anywhere, and somehow, neither were you. That same rootedness is growing in you now, slowly, quietly. You are becoming someone who doesn't need to chase peace because you're learning how to carry it. Not because your life is easy, but because your soul is finally aligned. You're not trying to outrun your past or overperform for your future. You're showing up fully where your feet are. This presence is powerful and fragile. Like holding water in your hands, it can slip away when squeezed too tightly. But when held gently, it nourishes. That's what silence has taught you. Presence isn't achieved, it's received. You start to trust that even when life gets loud again, and it will, you now have a compass, a way back, a knowing that you can return to stillness at any time, not as escape, but as remembrance, as refuge. It won't always be easy. Some days, the noise will win, the scroll will pull, the inbox will overflow. And that's okay. The point isn't perfection. The point is the path. And you know the way now. You know how to listen past the noise, how to discern between voices that demand and voices that invite, how to pause when you want to panic, how to breathe when your mind starts spinning. You've practiced it here, in the quiet, and it's real. You also know this. God doesn't need you to prove anything. He's not watching you like a scorekeeper. He's walking with you like a guide, not leading from a mountaintop with a megaphone, but whispering beside you step by step. You don't always hear him clearly, but you feel him now. And that's enough. It's strange how something so gentle can change you so deeply. But silence has a way of rebuilding you from the inside out. You begin to see yourself with clearer eyes, not as a project, but as a person. Not as a failure, but as a follower. One who is learning, returning, belonging. You're not lost anymore. You're just on a slower road. One where the landmarks are internal. Peace, discernment, wholeness. They don't always show up in photos, but they show up in how you treat yourself, how you breathe, how you love. So, tonight, stay here a little longer. Let your soul stretch out like roots, returning to familiar ground. Let the quiet remind you that you were never truly far. You just forgot the way. And now you remember. You used to think peace would come once everything was finished, once the inbox was clear, once the relationship was resolved, once the next step was obvious. But now you're beginning to see peace doesn't always follow completion. Sometimes it arrives in the waiting, in the letting go, in the holy space of missing out. Because the truth is, you're not actually missing out when you slow down. You're finding something the fast lane can't offer. You're finding clarity, presence, freedom. The world tells you that to be valuable, you must be everywhere, know everything, respond instantly, show up flawlessly. But it's a lie that keeps you exhausted and hollow. It keeps your eyes on what others have, while your soul quietly slips further from center. But tonight, the noise fades a little more, and in its place, not fear, not emptiness, just quiet enough to hear a deeper truth: you are already enough, even when you're offline. You're not falling behind by resting. You're simply stepping into a rhythm that honors your humanity. You are not made to be consumed, tracked, or optimized. You were made to be loved, and love doesn't need you to hustle. There's a different kind of abundance waiting for you, but it requires missing a few things. Missing the comparison game, missing the temptation to prove, missing the race to nowhere. In doing so, you create room for beauty, for depth, for God. Jesus didn't chase moments. He created them through presence, not pressure. He walked at the speed of love, not ambition. And that same pace is available to you if you're willing to walk differently. It won't be easy. You'll see others move faster, post more, appear more, but appearances rarely tell the truth. You know this now. You've lived it. You felt the ache that comes after a day spent performing instead of participating. And you felt the peace that comes when you stop trying to keep up. You can feel that peace now. It lives in your slower breath, in the way your muscles finally relax, in the way your thoughts no longer sprint ahead. It lives in your choice to be fully here, not for the world, but for yourself, for God. And strangely, the more you embrace missing out, the more you begin to see what you've been missing all along: your own presence, your own joy, the quiet smile you forgot you had, the beauty in simplicity, the freedom in not always needing to know. That's what silence gives you. Not less life, but more of it. The kind of life that doesn't need documenting to feel real. The kind of life that tastes like rest and sounds like grace. You no longer need to fill every gap. Some gaps are meant to be quiet, to hold space for mystery, for faith, for the slow unfolding of something sacred. You don't need all the answers. Just the next moment, just the next breath. So when the world tells you to move faster, you can smile gently and say, "No, thank you. I'm already home, not in a house, not in a title, but in your soul, in this silence, in the nearness of a God who doesn't need you to keep up, only to keep close." And you are close now, closer than you've been in a while, not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped. And that's when you saw. You were never behind. You were just being led at a different pace. One where peace could catch up to you. You've probably noticed by now, God doesn't shout over the noise. He doesn't compete with the chaos. He doesn't force his way through the scroll or shout over the chatter in your mind. He waits, patiently, softly, like someone who knows they're already close and just needs you to notice. He doesn't need to raise his voice because his presence carries weight without volume. He whispers not because he's distant, but because he's near, close enough to be felt when you're finally quiet enough to listen. You've learned to expect answers through signs, through clarity, through loud breakthroughs. But what if God is more often found in the murmur beneath your hurry, in the breath between thoughts, in the silence between two worries. That's where he lives, between the lines of your story, behind the curtain of your control, underneath the surface level noise that distracts and divides. And when you make space like you are tonight, you start to feel him. Not as a dramatic arrival, but as a steady presence that was never gone. Jesus didn't demand attention. He didn't build a brand or crave applause. He moved through crowds, but often left them. He healed, but also hid. He spoke, but often withdrew to listen. That rhythm wasn't random, it was sacred. And now you're learning to live by it too. The God who whispers invites a slower life, a simpler one. Not boring, just uncluttered. A life where silence is not something to escape, but something to enter. Because in that space, you remember what you forgot while trying to be everything for everyone, that being still isn't giving up. It's giving room. Room for grace. Room for healing. Room for the kind of love that doesn't perform or demand. The kind that simply stays. And when you hear that whisper, even faintly, it changes everything. Because it doesn't sound like pressure. It sounds like peace. You don't need to manufacture it. You don't need to earn it. It was already there beneath the static. You just needed to lower the volume long enough to hear it. Maybe the whisper says, "You're okay." Or, "Come sit with me." Or maybe nothing at all. Just the warmth of being held. No explanation. No solution. Just presence. And in that presence, you realize something. God has never been impatient with your process. He's not waiting for you to get it all right. He's simply waiting for you to come close. To be honest. To stop trying so hard and just be. There's beauty in whispers. They require proximity, attention, intimacy. And that's the kind of relationship God wants, not loud, but deep. Not perfect, but real. You might not hear words, but you'll feel alignment. Like something inside has finally settled. Like your soul has exhaled for the first time in days. That's the whisper's work. Gentle, but transformative. So when life grows loud again, and it will, you'll know what to do. You'll remember how to return to this space, how to lean in instead of lash out, how to listen instead of react. You'll remember that the loudest thing in your life doesn't have to be the most true. And you'll remember this, the whisper still speaks, always, waiting for you to pause, to breathe, to notice. Right now, the whisper is near. And it's enough. It happens softly, almost without you realizing it. The silence that once felt foreign, awkward, even, is now something you crave. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Because stillness no longer feels like absence. It feels like sanctuary. You've built a quiet space inside yourself. Not one that hides, but one that heals. A space that doesn't shut the world out, but invites something deeper in. The chaos still exists outside, but it no longer owns you. You've learned to return here, to the place where God is not demanding, but dwelling. You used to think of silence as a void, a space waiting to be filled. But now you see it as presence, as a fullness that doesn't need volume, a kind of holy weight that doesn't crush but holds. And this sanctuary, it's not in a building, not in a location. It's you. You have become the quiet place, the resting place, the place where faith can breathe. Jesus said little when the crowds pressed in. He healed with a word, or sometimes just a touch. He taught with stories that took time to unfold. And when it mattered most, when the world demanded spectacle, he chose stillness. He chose surrender. He chose silence. Maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not shouting louder, but trusting deeper. You've begun to embody that. In the way you pause before responding. In the way you wake and let the light in slowly. In how you've started noticing the wind again. Or the way your coffee feels warm in your hands. That's not small. That's spiritual. You're not who you were when this journey began. Something has softened, strengthened, rooted. You no longer chase the world's noise to feel alive. You've remembered that aliveness lives inside the quiet too. There will be days when you forget, when the noise pulls harder than your soul can resist. That's okay. The sanctuary is still here. It doesn't close. It waits. Like God, patient, gentle, steady. You might hear someone ask, "Aren't you afraid of missing out?" And now, from this place, you can answer softly, "I'm not missing anything important. I'm finally hearing what matters." This is where you live now, not in avoidance, but in alignment with your values, with your pace, with God's presence. You know what your soul needs to stay steady, and you're learning to honor it, to protect it. And in doing that, you've made space for peace, for grace, for others. You've become the kind of person who carries calm into chaos, who doesn't flinch at silence, who hears God not through noise but through nearness. You are no longer just surviving the noise. You are living in the quiet, and the quiet is alive with love. The world won't understand. That's okay. The world rushes, you rest. The world shouts, you listen. The world fills, you empty and find yourself full in ways the world can't measure. Because in this silence, you've discovered something holy, something eternal. Not just the absence of sound, but the presence of God. And that presence, it's home. You've come a long way tonight, not in miles, but in meaning. From the outer swirl of noise into the inner hush of stillness. From reaching outward for answers to quietly receiving what's already within. And now, here you are, softly settled, fully present, deeply held. Let this moment stretch a little longer. Let the quiet keep you. You don't need to rush to the next thing. You don't need to reopen the noise. You've made it to the sanctuary, and the sanctuary is staying with you. Notice how your breath has changed. Slower, more grounded. Like your body has remembered it's safe. Like your soul has remembered it's home. You don't need to fix everything tonight, or understand everything, or plan your way out of tomorrow. The only thing required now is rest. Deep, nourishing, soul-level rest. The kind that doesn't just refresh, but restores. You've heard whispers tonight, maybe from God, maybe from yourself. Either way, you listened. And that listening changed you. Let that change stay. Let it shape how you move tomorrow. how you speak, how you pause before the day begins, how you return to this stillness not as an escape, but as a way of being. Let it be enough that you are here, alive, breathing, loved. You don't have to go back to the noise, at least not in the same way. You've learned how to carry quiet within you now. You've built a sacred space inside a place where peace lives. And peace, once found, never truly leaves. So sleep tonight, without striving. Let your thoughts soften, like dusk rolling over a quiet field. Let your heart be light. Let your body know you are safe now. You can rest because you are already closer to Him than you think. Quiet enough, and you will feel Him with you.